up here with some of the oh man, I'm so the peanut gallery, but the old ladies. That's what Barbara was implying. I would not say that. Yeah, no, I would not. No, see, I'm getting to that point now. See, I'm like inching on to 40, and so like I'm getting close, and then like I'm going, 40 is really not that old, so like 60 is really not that old, right? And then it's like, I mean, like when you're getting to be like 100, Ray, no offense, when you're getting closer to that's getting old. So only old person I know is Ray, maybe. But he's earned it, right? Haven't you earned that? You've earned it, Brother Ray, haven't you? Yeah. He's lived it. Yeah. And you know what? If you have to raise Philip, for crying out loud, then you've just earned your way. I mean, I'm just telling you. All right. What was that? Well, you have a special place in heaven too. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Brother Keith, go ahead and lead us in prayer.
We come unto you, righteous Father, thank you for this day of life and this opportunity we have to gather here this hour to study for your word and worship you. We pray, Father, that all is said and done and the class will be for your profit and beneficial to us, Lord, that we are able to use what we learn to be better servants for thee. We're thankful for your Son, Jesus, and the love that he showed to us. We want the power of his truth. In his name we pray.
All right, so we're going to be starting off in Matthew chapter 11. And, actually, if you want to open up your Bible to Matthew chapter 11, we're going to be going back and forth right in there. Starting verse 19, it says this: The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they said, Behold, a gluttonous man and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners, and wisdom is justified by her works. And so let's think about this. Now, start off and we think about John the Baptizer. He at this point is having a moment of doubt. You go back to the beginning of this chapter, he has that moment of doubt. In verses 2 and 3 of chapter 11, it says, Now when John heard in the prison the works of the Christ, he sent by his disciples and said unto him, Art thou he that cometh, or look we for another? And, when I think about this, and of course, all of the things that Jesus has done up to this point, it's kind of hard to hear this coming from John. What he's done up to this point, he's, made the way for the Lord. He has come before him. He has even preached to a point and saying, look, we'll get on to this later in a little bit more detail, but says, look, I'm not even worthy to, loosen the sandals. I'm not even worthy to do that. And so he has spoken very highly of the Lord, and this has been known for such a long time. And then, of course, right here at this moment, he's saying what? He says, are you the one? Are you the one? Or are we looking for somebody else? And so, the first point here is, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, that's, how many times have we seen stuff like that, where, you can question somebody all day long, but what is it that they've done? What is it that Jesus has done? Now, in response to John the Baptizer, Jesus doesn't give a detailed, proof of his deity. He doesn't respond in that way. What does he do? See, what would we do? I guess that's the first thing. What would we do? We probably start laying out all the qualifications of what we have done up to this point. And he doesn't really do that. I mean, he says some things in general, but we probably would make a big case for ourselves, wouldn't we? If somebody said said, are you the one, that we're looking for? Or are you the one that's qualified for this position? Said, are you kidding me? I know that's the way that we are. I know I was talking about a preacher earlier, but I went to a congregation as a youth minister, is one of my first full-time works, and I got an interesting experience because they literally, just before I came, they got rid of their preacher, and they looked at me and were pretty much like, "Hey, what do you think about preaching?" And so I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about doing this. Really, I've only spoken a few times. I can't do this all the time." They're like, do it so often, but end result of this is I was wondering what happened with this previous preacher, and so I asked questions, and I wanted to know what was going on here, and why I was going to be in this position that I was about to be in, and they said, "Well, look here, let me give you a copy of his last sermon, and you'll get an idea of some things." Now, I realized much later on that poor guy was teaching the truth, and they didn't like it, and so they got rid of him based on that. But his last sermon did not help him out too much, because he got up, and he already knew he was leaving, and he said, "Look what I've done here. I've done this, and I've done that, and we've grown this, and I've done this, and I've done that." And he had a big I problem. He just kept saying, I. And that's what the average person's probably going to do when they feel slighted. They're going to say, "Well, look what I've done." But Jesus really doesn't do that. He's not, very forceful. But look at verses 4 through 6. And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Go and tell John the things which ye hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good tidings preached to them. And blessed is he whosoever shall find no occasion of stumbling in me." And so here he is. He's faltering for a moment. And how does Jesus respond? Well, you go ahead and you go back and you tell John the things that you're seeing and hearing. He's not. He gives them examples, but he's not saying, "Here, let me lay out my case for you." He's saying, "This is what you're seeing and hearing. Go back and tell them that." And then he ends it with what? "Blessed is he whosoever shall find no occasion of stumbling in me." So don't falter when it comes to the Lord. And so the basic response here is that, look, my resume speaks for itself. You go back and tell John the things that you are seeing and hearing. And of course, the gospel, according to John, demonstrates this kind of an attitude from the beginning to end. That Christ is, laying out these things as far as, why it is that we should believe. And in John 2, in verse 11, it says, "This beginning of his signs did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed on him." And so, from the very beginning, here it is. These are the reasons that you should believe. The same reasons that John, the baptizer, should have believed. These are the same things that are spoken about from the beginning. And then in John chapter 20, we've been using this verse a whole lot recently for whatever reason. In John 20, verses 30 and 31, "Many other signs, therefore, did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that ye may," what? "Believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye may have life in his name." That's one of the things that I love about reading through the gospel accounts. That when you're reading through those and you're seeing all the things that Jesus did, those things are written down for the purpose of us learning how to believe, increasing in faith. And so we mentioned that in the sermon, I believe, on Sunday morning, talking about the various divisions that we have of the Bible. We talked about the gospel accounts, and what did we say about the gospel accounts? They were meant for what? For people to believe. And then, you get over to Acts, and what is that meant for? That's for people to obey. And then you have the letters, and what is that meant for? That's to remain faithful. And so we have that same thing that we need to remember all the time. These things that Jesus was doing, he did it so that we might believe.
But John, in his teaching, he was proclaiming the Christ, Messiah. Could he have been just like the rest of the Jews, though? Thinking that Christ was going to release the Jews from prison, was going to take over, the Jewish race was going to be the dominant people. Here he was in prison for preaching. And could he be thinking, well, if this is the Christ, why is he not helping his people?
Yeah. I've never thought about that. I guess that's a distinct possibility, though. When I'm thinking about John the Baptizer, he oftentimes preaches, the kingdom of heaven. And so I believe he would have understood the spiritual side. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more.
Don't you also think that because they were related?
Yeah.
You look at people in your family that you grew up with different sometimes than other people see them. And that may have been difficult for him to think the Jesus that I grew up with,
Yeah.
was the Son of God.
Yeah.
The Son of God again.
Well, obviously he believed to some extent, right?
Well, he did.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah. Well,
I see where that'd be a problem.
I think that coupled with the fact, and maybe even that too, coupled with the fact that you're in jail. You're in prison, and look, man, I have done a prison ministry once, and I'll tell you what, that is not the most fun place to be. It really isn't. I went all the time that I could because, for no pun intended, I had a captive audience. They were ready to listen, and so I would teach, and I had lots of questions, and so I enjoyed that. But the fact that I'm in there with people that have done some violent things, that was not fun as far as that aspect of it was concerned. Think about John the Baptizer. He's in there with people who are insurrectionists and all kinds of stuff. He's surrounded by people that really he doesn't really belong with. He hasn't done anything. And of course, you don't know what all he would have had to have gone through. I mean, the conditions in prisons vary, even state by state in the U.S.
And the Romans were not.
And exactly. Yeah, that's the point I was kind of getting to, is that the Romans were not really, Romans were really good at one thing, and that was being really cruel. And so, they like to pervert just about anything, pervert their lives, pervert justice. It was just not really the best society, really. And really, not to get off topic here, but not really too far off in many regards as America is concerned currently in our political society. But yeah, I think the biggest part of that to me, and this is just my thought process, is that John is not in a good spot. And you can be about the most upbeat person. I mean, come on, think about, let's just make it a real easy case. Most of us, if not all of us, have seen Pollyanna, right? Pollyanna, what was she like for majority of the movie? She is happy-go-lucky. Things don't go her way. She gets hurt. And, she's now, the great part of that is she's lifted up by the people she's been lifting up. But what happens to her is she gets down and out. And that happens. That can happen to anybody.
But throughout Christ's ministry, he was constantly bombarded with the questions: when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this?
Yeah.
When are you going to take over?
Yeah.
It might have been a weak spot in John's life.
Yeah.
To need some reinforcement, saying, "Hey, we're expecting this, but it's not coming forward. How long is it going to take?
Yeah.
Are you truly the one that's going to do this?"
Well, and two, I'll give it from my point of view as well, as far as like just personally as a preacher. There have been times where I've been around people that were not thinking along the lines of the scriptures. And I would get up and I'd preach something, and then I'd get met at the back door with angry faces. And they were just upset with me, and more than one, and they're just mad at me for preaching what I had just preached to them. Like, that just came right out of the Bible. I said what God said. That's all I did. And then they got mad. Now, I had that for so long, and I've got a couple of guys in particular that when things I would just try to check myself a little bit. And I'd call him up. Brother Blackwell is one. I'd call him up from time to time, and I'd go, okay, here's what's going on. This is what I've taught, and this is what everybody's saying. Now, I'm pretty sure this is what the Bible teaches, right? Or am I crazy? Because you get to a point where everybody else is saying one thing, and you're the only one, at least seemingly the only one, saying the right thing. And then you go, okay, wait, am I the one that's wrong? Am I the one that's crazy? Is everybody else sane and I'm the insane one? Or, am I the one that's getting things wrong? And so you do start questioning yourself when you're outnumbered. So that's another possibility. Anybody else? We've spent a long time on this thought, but, anybody else before we move on?
I think when you have problems with obedience to God, it's really easy to take things personally when the Bible says, do A and B, and in your own life you're doing C and D. It's really easy to take it personally when you're not living a faithful life.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. We don't get through the material. It's your fault. Okay. I don't know who started this stuff, but Philip. It was Philip. It's another elder. We have a problem with our elders here. Oh, we're all right. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 22. I skipped past John 13. John 13, verse 34 and 35. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, even as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. So we know that this is a teaching that kind of set apart the disciples of Christ because they were supposed to be ones that were loving each other, not having this infighting and stuff like that. That wasn't supposed to be happening, but they were supposed to be following God's will and following their master and loving each other. This is repeated somewhat in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. Seeing ye have purified your souls in your obedience to the truth unto unfeigned love of the brethren, love one another from the heart fervently. So we know that this is the attitude that we ought to have. And then also we know that this is the attitude that we have of loving each other. We should love also those that are outside of Christ. Of course, we think, I think mainly to Galatians 6 and verse 10. Do good unto all men, especially they that are of the household of faith. Well, sometimes people focus on that last part. Well, we got to do good to our brethren. Well, we do good unto all men, but especially our brethren. That's the point. But going on to that, those that are outside, we need to recognize some things. The poor need the gospel preached unto them as well. I know that this is a temptation even today because sometimes people we know what real estate is. The number one rule of real estate is what? Location, location, location. You got to get that good location, and so sometimes that good location ends up you're evangelizing to people in and around your building, and maybe that means that you're only looking to those that are well-to-do. I know that I've been to a couple of door knockings with other congregations when I was in school, and I have knocked on doors in these homes that probably now with inflation are probably well over $1 million, and we go knocking on these doors in these nice affluent neighborhoods, but But you know what? While everybody needs the gospel, I'm not saying don't go and do that. But you know what? I've also found that guess who is more likely to respond to the gospel? The poor. The ones who are not as affluent are the ones who tend to become obedient to the gospel. I've knocked on a whole lot of houses that were, $400,000 plus homes. I have never gotten a Bible study out of one of those homes. But when I get down to that middle class on down, I get lots of Bible studies. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because they think they've got everything they need already. I don't know. But, everybody needs the gospel preached to them. But I think sometimes people focus more on certain classes of people. And let's not go door knocking on that side of the tracks, Sorry if you live in Canova. That's not what I was meaning. I was not meaning that. Don't get upset with me. But yeah, no, like some people don't want to go on that side of the tracks. And of course, back where I'm from, the other side of the tracks is not nearly as nice as Canova. The other side of the tracks from where I'm from, that's not a good place to be. Lots of rundown housing and things like that. And the people that can afford that housing usually tend to be rougher and things like that. Everybody needs the gospel preached to them. We don't need to be judges of that. We need to just go and teach. Oh, no. Matter of fact, I did a good study on that. Man, we're not covering this material at all. That's great. Yeah, I know. Everybody said, where are you from? Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Yeah, no.
First few years in Egypt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's lots of things to say about that. But yeah, no, it's it is interesting though that people oftentimes will go to those higher ups, but Paul said, not many noble, not many mighty are called. So we need to remember that too. But everybody deserves the opportunity to hear the gospel. That is true. But I think the interesting thing here is that Jesus goes to the poor even. I want to jump back in here. If you interrupt me, that's okay. I'm just going to ignore you. So I'm going to talk. I've got a microphone. I can just lean in real close. Matthew 11 and verse 5, he talks about the blind receive their sight, and the lame walk, and the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good tidings preached to them. In Luke 14, in verse 21 and 23, says, and the servant came and told his Lord these things. And of course, having the get together here, gathering all these good people from the city. And what happened to them? Oh, they've got something to do. Please excuse me for all this. And then what do we see? I think this is a great lesson as far as this particular point is concerned. But it says, then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in hither the poor and maimed and blind and lame. And the Lord said unto the servant, go out to the highways and hedges and constrain them to come in, that my house may be filled. So, it starts off with the elite. They don't come. And then he goes to all these people who are down and out, and they come, but there's still more room. Go out into the hedges. Go find everybody. Make sure my house is filled. Now, when you think about that concerning the kingdom, think about where did the message go first? First it was the Jews. The Jews were taught first. But then it was the Gentiles. The Gentiles have been brought in. So now it's everybody. It's not just the Jews. So the Jews were the chosen ones that got it first, right? And they, as a matter of fact, there's several passages that go along these lines there. They rejected what was being taught at the time. They wouldn't even obey that old law. And many of them, that is, obviously it's a blanket statement here. But they didn't obey, and that's why you have a new one. That's why Jesus came, because you needed a new covenant. So here's another point. Let's get on to the next one. We're going to have to kind of move through this if we're going to get through class at all. We can and should hand out compliments. Now, I'm going to head this one off at the pass. If you're not good at receiving compliments, which I know I'm not, somebody will be like, hey, good lesson. I'm like, thanks, appreciate it, yeah. And I'm sure people probably think, well, that's half-hearted. And it's not. I just don't really do well with the response. I try, I do my best. If I offend you, I'm really sorry. To God be the glory. That's all I care about, But it's good for us to compliment each other. And to when someone's doing something good, I remember having a young lady that she was in one of my youth groups, and she was notorious for dressing immodestly. And as a young man, I can't really say much, because if I say something, someone's going to be like, well, you pervert, what are you doing? Why are you looking? And so I took a different approach, and I started complimenting her very much when she dressed modestly, which in the beginning was few and far between. But what happened is, it was subconscious, I guess. She started dressing more modestly when she was coming to services. And all I can relate to that is that she received compliments for when she was doing good. It's not enough, even with our children, we do the same thing. It's funny. Someone described this one time when I was working with a congregation. They said, when you have children, they start off and they start rolling around, and you're like, oh, that's so good, you're doing a good job. And then they start crawling, or they start scooting around, like, oh, good job, baby, good job, and they start crawling, and you're just so adorable, I just love you. And they start standing up, oh, they stood up, this is so great. They start walking around, they took their first steps, this is so wonderful. And then they start walking everywhere and pulling things off the shelves, and you start going, no, everywhere. It was yes, 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 yes before, and now it's no. They have no clue what's going on. But what we need to do is, same principle is, when they're doing something good, you tell them, man, they're doing something good. You let them know. Well, we are all one because of salvation. And, we got some passages I want to skip through there because we know those. But here's a point that I think that we need to understand. And you may not realize this as much as I probably have, because I've seen this really firsthand plenty of times. But there shouldn't be an ounce of competition felt amongst brethren. There shouldn't be any competition among brethren. I say that because I know. Now, I grew up in a congregation where we participated in a program that had, it was training young men to be leaders. But there was a competition that would happen every year. Every year you go to Nashville, or Atlanta. There's a couple of different places. Go to these places, and then you would compete against each other in acts of worship. And I tell you what, sometimes when I say that, people they're like, "What is that?" And they'll wag their heads like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, people are doing that, and I'm like, I love that response, because in the South, that is not what you get. I have leprosy whenever I say that in the South. Whenever I've been in Alabama and Tennessee and I've said these things, they'll get mad at me. I want to prove a point real quick. I know that is not good, because the disciples even had a problem with that at one point. And let's see how Jesus responded to that. Luke chapter 22 and verses 24 through 30. It says, and there arose also a contention among them, which of them was accounted to be the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles have lordship over them, and they that have authority over them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so. Be he that is the greater among you, let him become as the younger, and that is the chief, as he that doth serve. For which is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat? But I am in the midst of you, as he that serveth. But ye are they that have continued with me in my temptations, and I appoint unto you a kingdom, even as my Father appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and ye shall sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. How did Jesus feel about the 12 trying to figure out who was the greatest? You want to be great in the kingdom? Well, then you serve. Yeah, you serve. Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm pretty fired up about this topic because it has taken over the brotherhood in many areas of the country. And I tell you, it is just a sinful thing. It's just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And I was talking to somebody that was kind of higher up in this organization, and I said, you guys are just getting it wrong. Because serving the Lord is its own great reward. It's the greatest reward you can have. You don't need a trophy to tell you that you did good at song leading or preaching or any of that, any of that stuff. What you need is to know how to humbly serve your God. So we are all one in Christ. And we think about, the relationship even that, Jesus and John had. They were complimentary of each other. They said things that were good of each other. John recognized Jesus for who he was and is. And in John 1 verse 27, it says, even he that cometh after me, the latch of whose shoe I am not worthy to unloose. In John 1 and verse 29, a few verses later, on the morrow he seeth Jesus coming unto him and saith, behold, the Lamb of God that taketh away the sin of the world. And then if you skip on down to verse 36 again, and he looked upon Jesus as he walked and saith, behold, the Lamb of God. Things would be so much better if we just focused on the Lord. If we just focused on Christ, we kept our eyes on Jesus, the church would be much stronger and better off.
Peter proved that, didn't he?
Yeah.
Took his eye off of it.
Yeah, that's right. Keep your eyes on the Lord, right? Yeah, I like making that point. That's a good place to do it too. Jesus also thought highly of John, as a matter of fact, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to skip over some of this. But Matthew 11, we'll look at this. Matthew 11, 7 through 15, and as these went their way, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John, what went ye out into the wilderness to behold? A reed shaken with the wind? But what went ye out to see? A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they that wear soft raiment are in kings' houses. But wherefore went ye out to see a prophet? Yea, I say unto you, and much more than a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before thy face. Now I think about this, and I'm going to stop right there. You can read the rest later if you'd like. But I think about this. This is Jesus' cousin, close cousin, just a close relative. And think about your first cousin. Were you close to them? I know I was with my first cousin, and it was nice, And just to think about that, just to think about the idea of maybe you're going to go meet a group of people that you've never met before, but you've got a family member that's so close to you, they go out and they start telling about you before you ever get there. They're singing your praises. So we also see something. The question is, how should we talk to others? Well, In Ephesians 4, verse 29 to 32, says, "Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth, but such as is good for edifying, as the need may be, that it may give grace to them that hear." Now, I want to make a point really quick about that. A lot of times, and I've done this too, I'll get up and I'll preach and I'll say, let no corrupt communication come out of your mouth, and then we'll start talking about, cursing or something like that. Is that really the entirety of what's being said here? No. Listen to that again. But such as is good for what? For edifying. So building people up, as the need may be, that it may give what? Grace to them that hear. And we can go on. There's more to be said there, but you'll have to do that on your own. Skip on to the next point. God's servants are supposed to be different. In 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 18, "Be not unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what fellowship have righteousness and iniquity? Or what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what portion hath a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For we are a temple of the living God. Even as God said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come ye out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be to you a father, and ye shall be to me sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty." You think about this. We cannot talk like the lost. We can't dress like the lost. Can't have the same habits as the lost. And at the same time be what we see in Matthew 5, verses 13 and 14 as the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We can't do that by acting just like the world. Romans 12 and verse 2 says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We need to function just as a body. We are not all the same, parts of that body. In 1 Corinthians 12, we see that there's different parts of the body. But you know what? We can't all do the same thing. If we all did, then the body would be insufficient, right? We're not going to get through this at all. You've got to walk to the bell still. I haven't heard the bell. So, no matter what you do, somebody will be there to criticize. That's the next point. So you got criticism there. And you know what? I think I'll try to remember to pick up there next time. We'll try that. Philip, it's on you. It's all your fault.
Get a bunch of ladies help you out too.
Yeah. Instead of running the competition for us people there.